And let's begin with breaking news that's coming in. US President Donald Trump has had a conversation with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and European Union leaders just days before Trump is set to meet with Putin at what's being deemed as a peace meeting in Alaska. Now, Trump and Zelensky have had a conversation via phone call. Trump has said that it was a very good call. In Trump language, he says, I rate it a 10 on 10. Now, Trump has also claimed, while asked on his peace meeting, which will be happening in Alaska with Putin, he says there's a good chance of a second meeting taking place. So he says that in that case, there will be a meeting with Zelensky as well, in which case it becomes a triangular meeting of Putin, Zelensky and Trump coming together if Trump says the Alaska meeting goes well. Trump also saying that Russia will face consequences if the war is not stopped. This is in fact the message that's gone across from Donald Trump. Let me bring in Shivani Sharma for more details. So on this, Shivani, days to go, of course, for that meeting between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. And while US made it very clear that there's no room for Zelensky to be a part of that meeting, we understand there's been a conversation between Trump and Zelensky today.
Certainly, Akshita, there's a build-up to the meeting of Donald Trump and President Putin. And before this meeting, Donald Trump has spoken to the European leaders and also President Zelensky, and he's called it a good call, Akshita. He said that it was a very good call, and we know that Zelensky is out of meeting between the US president and the Russian president that has to happen on 15th of August. And probably this meeting will be deciding the future of the ongoing war that has now come up to the fourth year continuously. So this was the conversation that has taken place, and we know that Donald Trump has been trying to mediate peace between Russia and Ukraine. There's been no success yet because both the countries have been keeping their own conditions. But after today's call and the meeting with President Putin, it will be decided that what comes for these two countries. But certainly this was a conversation that was held between Zelensky and US President Donald Trump.
All right, Shivani, thanks very much for joining us with those details. It sets the stage essentially for that meeting which will take place between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin in just 2 days from now on 15th of August in Alaska is where that meeting will happen. And just before that, Trump has spoken to Zelensky as well as leaders of the European Union. Important to highlight here that the EU tried really hard and pushed for Zelensky to be a part of the Alaska meet. But Donald Trump said no way, there's going to be no representation by Ukraine in that meeting, that it will be a direct US-Russia talk. Listen in to what Trump has said.
We had a very good call. He was on the call. President Zelensky was on the call. I would rate it a 10, very, very friendly. I know the leaders because I was at NATO, as you know. I took it from 2% to 5%, 2% that wasn't paid, 5% that is paid, which is trillions of dollars in defense capability. No, it was always going to be, I was going to meet with President Putin, and then after that, I'm going to call the leaders and President Zelensky. I'm going to call President Zelensky, and then I'll call, probably in that order, the leaders. There's a very good chance that we're going to have a second meeting, which will be more productive than the first, because the first is I'm going to find out where we are and what we're doing. If the first one goes okay, we'll have a quick second one. I would like to do it almost immediately, and we'll have a quick second meeting between President Putin and President Zelensky and myself, if they'd like to have me there. And that would be a meeting where maybe it could be absolutely work. But the first meeting will not work that out. Certain great things can be gained in the first. It's going to be a very important meeting.
Okay, so that's Donald Trump there setting the stage for that meeting that will be taking place between him and Vladimir Putin, updates of which we will track very closely here on India Today. But let's get to our top focus story here on NewsTrack, which is the Supreme Court's order on stray dogs. 2 days on, the debate continues. But let's get you exactly what the Supreme Court order says. The complete order is now out. It's been released. And let's get your highlights. What has the Supreme Court really said? What's the fine print on their solution to the stray dog menace in the national capital? Now, in the directive that the Supreme Court has put out, they've said and reiterated what was mentioned previously in the observations, that stray dogs must be removed from all localities. And they've said that authorities have to decide exactly how this will be achieved. But the order does make a mention of stray dogs being moved into these shelters. The order has stressed that there should be no lethargy or compromise in the execution of this task, warning that any individual or organization obstructing this process will face the strictest action. Again, something in line with the observations that we had reported on India Today, in which very clearly the court had said that any activist who tries to interfere, any RWA that tries to interfere, it will not be taken lightly. The court has also said that sentiments should not interfere with this, as the directive has been issued in larger public interest. Now, the top court has said in its order that people, particularly infants, children and the elderly, can move freely without a fear of dog bites. And that's the mission with which they've actually come out with this order. But there's obviously been a question, and this is what's triggered the debate, about whether this is essentially a death sentence for all of the strays out there. And this is what activists have been alleging, hitting the streets and protesting. The Supreme Court has actually mentioned that, in the sense that they've said that any cruelty or neglect of the dogs at shelters will not be tolerated, that they must not be starved or left unmonitored. The Supreme Court has made it very clear that there should be CCTV monitoring that takes place so that adequate care is also provided to these stray dogs. But here's the big question, and the Supreme Court doesn't mention this in their order. What about the infrastructure? This is one basic argument that constantly comes out, which is that Delhi NCR, the National Capital Region, simply doesn't have enough shelters currently. And what really will authorities achieve in a matter of 2 months, which they failed to achieve for the last many years with the animal birth control mechanism, with the ABC mechanism? They failed to ensure an adequate sterilization drive. But can they actually build shelters in that time? Or will they effectively, to ensure that the Supreme Court order is followed, resort to mass culling? That is the concern. Now, the Chief Justice of India, importantly, has transferred this case to a new 3-judge bench. And the judges who passed the order previously, whether it was Mahadevan or Pardiwala, they are not a part of this bench. And now you're going to see essentially 3 judges who had nothing to do with the previous order looking into this particular case. That hearing is scheduled for tomorrow. So important day in the courts tomorrow. We'll see what really this 3-judge bench has to say, whether they agree with the previous order of putting these strays in shelters. But let's get you first to all the details of the protests, the debate in our report.
One order from the top court and 2 distinctly strong reactions. The top court diktat, all stray dogs off the streets of Delhi NCR in 8 weeks. A howl of protests from dog lovers and animal rights activists. A counter pushback by those wanting a nationwide order, not just restricted to Delhi NCR. The Chief Justice of India, B.R. Gawai, has now assured to review a plea challenging the Supreme Court's contentious directive to relocate all stray dogs to shelters in 8 weeks. Amidst the crackdown, voices of dissent grew louder. Fresh protests by dog lovers and activists were seen in film city Noida, where some of the country's biggest news channels are located.
No 2 pounds! No 2 pounds! No 2 pounds! No 2 pounds! Yes, 2 pounds!
What you're seeing behind me are a section of people who are dog lovers, who are protesting against the Supreme Court order, which have asked to remove the stray dogs from the streets. They're also partly angry with a section within the media about a coverage that they say has actually led to the protest in the first place. They want the ABC program, which is the animal birth control program, to be implemented nicely, because that's the only scientific manner in which you can reduce the number of dogs on the streets. This is not the right way to actually have strays removed inhumanly, and that's the reason they are protesting.
While there is an infrastructural abyss, and Delhi will have to spend more on dog shelters than it does on public health to just implement the Supreme Court order, questions need to be asked of the overtly underwhelming performance of the MCD to control the dog menace in Delhi. In 21-22, the MCD spent 5.9 crores on stray dogs, of which 5 crores went towards sterilization and just 70 lakh towards building sterilization centers. A Delhi Assembly panel estimated the stray dog population at 8 lakhs in 2019, up from 5.6 lakhs in the last census of 2009. Comparable trends are visible in other metros. Bengaluru spends nearly 9.4 crore tackling the stray problem, while Mumbai BMC spent 11.2 crores the same year, which is financial year 2022. The low spending by the MCD comes even as dog bite cases surge. In Delhi, reported cases jumped nearly 4-folds. In January 2025 alone, the city logged 3,196 dog bite cases. If the MCD even spent 6 crores on stray dogs as it listed for financial year spending the year 2021-22, then there had to be some documentary evidence on ground. What is to the contrary. Meanwhile, caught in this tug of war between humane care and hardline cleanup, Delhi faces a crucial question. Can the city find a compassionate way to keep its streets safe without losing its soul? Bureau Report, India Today.
Let's get to a reality check. Is this something that's actually possible, that we move all of the 10 lakh stray dogs into shelters across Delhi NCR in a matter of 8 weeks? Well, the reality is that currently there are barely any shelters, and the ones that stand have zero facility. The country, of course, remains divided over the Supreme Court's directive, but a key question looms large. Can the order even be implemented? How many of these required shelters actually exist? How many more need to be put up? And also, in the current shelters that exist, what is their condition? Can they house these stray dogs and ensure their safety? Here's the ground report.
In 8 weeks, about 10 lakh dogs across Delhi NCR are expected to be taken and into animal shelters. But where are these shelters? Do they even exist on paper? And are they equipped to take in lakhs and lakhs of stray dogs permanently? To answer these questions, India Today visited animal welfare centers run by the Municipal Corporation of Delhi to assess their condition, only to find serious operational lapses. The Animal Birth Control Center in Tughlakabad is leased out to a Gujarat-based NGO that has previously faced suspension orders for illegal, irresponsible and cruel animal activities. Despite all irregularities and violation of animal birth control rules, the NGO managed to obtain the tender in Delhi.
The operational challenges are very different from what it is written on paper. Ideally, an ABC center should be running in the proper manner. The doctors should be present, and clearly it shouldn't be shut down like the one that we see here right now. I'll try my best to give you a glimpse from down of this center that is in Tughlakabad. These are the government-run ABC programs that are done in the national capital.
India Today also found the Animal Birth Control Unit in Lajpat Nagar locked. The staff did not respond to repeated knocks and the gate remained shut.
We are trying to get in touch with somebody to open the shelter for us, but it seems like the doors have been closed from inside at the moment. So this is the ground reality of shelters. First of all, there aren't many shelters that are run by the MCD for dogs. There are just these places where these are sterilization centers that are run by the MCD. But even though this is the condition where a registered center of the MCD is not even open at the time during the day per so.
At the Masoodpur Sterilization Centre in Vasant Kunj, the only doctor on duty was absent. Surgery entries were not shown. There was no record of when dogs had been brought in, and the staff admitted that several dogs in the shelter had not yet undergone surgery. To pile on, the facility was unclean, there were no bathing facilities, and food for the dogs was left uncovered.
The situation seems to be deplorable because the entire center needs a little bit organization. There is no cleaning as such, and there is staff shortage as well. You know, the condition here is that there are only fans and hardly one particular tube light that is also not functional on this particular side. In the heaty months of the summers, this place must be really hot for these dogs to be kept out in the open like this.
According to NCD sources, Delhi has no dedicated dog shelters and only 20 sterilization centers with a combined capacity for about 2,500 dogs at a time. Experts say controlling the stray population requires sterilizing at least 70% of dogs, a target unlikely to be met with existing systems. But with the Supreme Court's directive in place, they said they are obliged to follow orders despite the challenges. With Milan Sharma and Shreya Chatterjee in Delhi, Bureau Report, India Today.
I'm sure by now you've heard a lot from both sides of the stray dog divide. But there's a special documentary that I want to draw your attention to, published a short while back on NewsMo. If you hadn't heard of Mo, it's India's fastest growing Gen Z platform on the internet, powered proudly by us here on India Today. And in this exclusive documentary that we're about to show you, Kartiki Arora, a creator with Mo, takes you inside the feeder RWA clashes, mob assaults, missing dogs, and the 2023 animal birth control rules. The big question is, can India find a humane, legal middle ground? Here's what Kartiki found.
One question, one courtroom, one firestorm. Recently, during a hearing, the Supreme Court asked a Noida petitioner, why don't you feed the stray dogs in your own house? It wasn't a verdict, but it certainly sparked a fury among feeders and relief among residents.
It's impactful when somebody powerful says something insensitive.
सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने बिल्कुल सही बोला, जो लोग रोड पे आवारा कुत्तों को पाल रहे हैं उन्हें आवारा कुत्तों को सही सम्मान देना चाहिए, अपने घर में रखना चाहिए.
Across India, feeding stray dogs is legal but increasingly contested. Tensions are rising between dog lovers and housing bodies over space, safety and rights. Dog lovers faced harassment, threats and increasing hostility from residents.
So I've been feeding strays since 2016, I guess. I think so anybody who feeds must have faced some sort of harassment at some point.
वहाँ से वहाँ तक कुत्ते और नहीं मिलते आपको ये सोसाइटी में उनको भी खिलाते हैं तो फिर हम अपनी सोसाइटी में नहीं खिलाने देंगे.
I was recently assaulted by a mob of residents at J99 Society in Gurgaon for feeding stray dogs.
मुझे ये गुंडागर्दी नहीं चाहिए. आप देख रहे हो, this is गुंडागर्दी.
And out of the 50-60 dogs there are hardly 5-6 to be seen now. So where are the dogs?
But मेरे neighbor है और इन्होंने रात को ये गार्ड ने वेरीफाई किया, बट he said कि वो puppies को because they disappeared overnight.
Their simple reason is the plot costs 1 crore and this society is not meant for dogs. They don't want the dogs there.
अब वो मेरे पे अटैक करे तो मैं हाथ जोड़ दूं कि आओ मुझे काटो.
So there has been a lot of inclusivity of animals in the community for thousands of years. This is not something new.
People who feed strays say they are upholding compassion and public health. But among many non-feeders, stray dogs invoke fear, especially when the dogs chase after their children or prowl the neighborhood streets.
Yeah, people, they do tell us not to feed in front of their house. आप यहाँ पर मत खिलाओ, वहाँ पर मत खिलाओ. आप क्यों खिला रहे हो? आप इनको अपने घर ले जाओ. तो पहली चीज़ तो ये कि लोगों को समझना चाहिए कि डॉग्स टेरिटोरियल एनिमल्स हैं. अगर एक डॉग ने दो घर के बीच में अपनी जगह बनाई है तो वो उन दो घर के बीच में ही रहेगा. वो खाना भी वहीं खाएगा, वो सोएगा भी वहीं और उसका टेरिटरी भी वही रहेगी.
हमारे कुछ रेजिडेंट्स हैं जो पेट लवर के नाम पे उन्हें खाना देते हैं।
एक कुत्ता आता है, वो खाना खाता है, फिर उसके साथ साथ जब अगली बार 2-3 कुत्ते आते हैं, फिर वो क्या होता है कि खाना खिलाने की वजह से ही वहाँ पे डॉग्स आने स्टार्ट हो जा रहे हैं।
उनको अगर आप खाना खिला रहे हो तो अगर वो किसी को बाइट कर रहे हैं तो उसकी ओनरशिप किसकी है?
You know, you can't take them away from the society. Why not? The society is more for people who live in there, who've paid lakhs of rupees to have their flats in there. They want to open playground for their kids. They want to walk in peace, enjoy the good weather. You know, they don't want to be jumped by a pack of dogs, get bitten, and then, I mean, I took 7 injections.
हम लोग मॉर्निंग में वॉक कर रहे थे। यहाँ B1 टावर के सामने एक महिला है जिन्होंने कुत्तों को लिटरली वहाँ पे ऐसे खाना खिला रही हैं। 4, 5, 10 कुत्ते ऐसे थे, वो दे स्टार्ट अटैक। इवन मेरे पास एक स्टिक थी जिसकी वजह से वो थोड़ा सा मेरे पास नहीं आया, नहीं तो मे बी आई वॉज ऑल्सो द सफर।
के बच्चे पर भी अटैक कर दे। रात को एक बार जा रहे थे टावर, इसी टावर में रहते हैं वो पर्सन, वो जस्ट गाड़ी के पास अपने खड़े थे, उसी से मेरे डॉग आया और काट दिया उनके बच्चे को। कोई पूछने वाला नहीं है। मेरे सेम ग्रुप ऑफ डॉग मुझे 2 बार अटैक किया।
There is this tag being given to us like, oh, you're a dog lover, as if there is some crime being happening.
So when a dog bites, should the feeder be blamed?
Several RWAs have been acting against court orders or set guidelines and laws. Feeders or residents cannot be held responsible for dog bites caused by community dogs. The simple reason being, community dogs do not belong to feeders or residents. They are the responsibility of the local municipality or the panchayat or the state government.
आप नहीं डरते हो, आप डॉग लवर हो, नहीं डरते हो। हो सकता है मुझे डर लगता हो, मेरे बच्चे को डर लगता हो।
ठीक है, खाना दीजिए, हम भी देंगे। देखो, बच्चों को खाना हम भी देंगे, लेकिन उसके लिए फीडिंग पॉइंट बनाएं जो सोसाइटी के बाहर बना हुआ है।
Each dog has its own territory and they would like to be fed around that. So you can't expect all of the dogs to be brought to one feeding zone.
The zones should be allocated with a scientific basis in mind. For example, in my area, I was forced to have just one zone when there are 2 territories of dogs. So how should I force the dogs of 2 territories to come and eat at one place?
It is Rule 20 of the Animal Birth Control Rules 2023, which make it the responsibility of the Resident Welfare Association or the local authority to demarcate or designate feeding spots in consultation with feeders.
A high throughput animal birth control program is the only practical, scientific, compassionate and legal way of doing things. That's the answer to everything.
The real question isn't just who gets to feed the dogs. It's this. True coexistence doesn't silence either voice. It listens to both. What are your thoughts?
And you can catch that full video on both sides of the debate over stray dog menace on our more platforms. That's all we have time for in this edition of NewsTrack. Thanks very much for tuning in.